Namaste and welcome to this edition of The Right Stand, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure you would agree if I were to say that respect is a two-way street. Some adara, everybody needs to respect everyone. This is something that Ram Madhavji spoke about when we had the conversation around Mohan Bhagwat ji's interview. We'll play out that conversation in the latter half of this edition of The Right Stand. But spare a thought and park this in your head, at the back of your head. When we try and, analyze threadbare, this supremacy attitude, boisterous supremacy attitude, which has caused a huge political furor. There are entities or people who are turning around and saying, who are you to say something like that? But is this attitude a reality? And can this attitude prevail? Because Mohan Bhagwat doesn't talk about a boisterous supremacy attitude which he believes Muslims need to shun in India for pluralism to exist and for some adara or respect for all to exist. He also says that alternative thought streams like communists, even Hindus, anybody has to shed this supremacy attitude that I am better than you, I am superior to you, you are inferior to me. This thought process has to be shed. Can pluralism in Bharat, that is the true Hindu ethos or Hindutva ethos of Hindustan, actually exist if one believes the other is inferior, this othering exists? We park that thought and we will dwell on it in detail through the course of the next hour. This is the special edition of The Right Stand, ladies and gentlemen. One debate, one angle, one aspect. The interview by Mohan Bhagwat and the aspect that he's spoken about. Now, what did he say and what have been the reactions? Let's start with that. First up, this is what Mohan Bhagwat ji said. He said, the simple truth is this: Hindustan should remain Hindustan. There is no harm to Muslims living today in Bharat. If they wish to stick to their faith, they can. If they want to return to the faith of their ancestors, they may. It is entirely their choice. There is no such stubbornness among Hindus. Islam has nothing to fear. But at the same time, Muslims must abandon their boisterous rhetoric of supremacy. This is what Mohan Bhagwat said. He further goes on to very clearly elucidate what he meant by boisterous rhetoric of supremacy. We have ruled over you. We are superior to you. We are bigger. We are the only ones who deserve to rule, and we will eventually rule Bharat once again. This kind of conversation talk must be dropped. The reaction that came from the likes of Asaduddin Owaisi, who is Mohan to give Muslims permission to live in India? Nobody is giving anybody permission, but that's what he has said. He says, not here to adjust our faith or please alleged celibates in Nagpur. So the personal jibe also goes, don't want to adjust. Then he says, enough Hindus feel boisterous rhetoric of supremacy of RSS. So that's the jibe back at the RSS. Kapil Sibal, insan, humans should remain insan, is what Kapil Sibal has come out and said. Brinda Karat from the left, highly objectionable, anti-constitutional and provocative is what the comment has been said or interview has been. Bhagwat ji will prepare and decide the criteria for living in India. So the jibe coming from the left, whereas he said that even the left has to drop this entire supremacy attitude that we are better than you. DK Shivkumar, they want to divide and we want to unite the people. That's the word coming from DK Shivkumar of the Congress party. Amik Jamai, Samajwadi, Muslims don't believe in the idea of supremacy, is what Amik Jamai is also coming out and saying. Then, it's just a dog whistle and nothing else. It's just a dog whistle and nothing else. Now, does this supremacist attitude exist or not, ladies and gentlemen? Who said what and when? We, Muslims, have ruled this country for 800 years. Maulvi Farooq, Jammu and Kashmir cleric, in 2022 said this. Hindus came to power just 70 years ago, is what he has said. You can't eliminate us or our identity. We dream of 2047 when political power will return to Muslims. Popular Front of India. PFI can subjugate the cowardly majority community to their knees. The banned Popular Front of India, which is now thousands of cadre across the country still out on the loose, PFI can bring back the glory of Islam in India. So entities still exist. They now stand pariah. Now, Sajid Rashidi, after 50 to 100 years, they will learn mosque turned into a temple. Muslim judge, Muslim ruler or Muslim government may come to power. Won't a mosque be constructed by destroying this temple? A mosque will definitely be built by destroying the temple. This is with respect to Ram Janmabhoomi and Ram Mandir. Worms and insects like you have been ruled by us for 832 years. This is Shaukat Ali, AIMIM leader, who said this in 2022. You Hindus used to do Ji Hazur with your hands folded. He has said this. We ruled for 800 years. What else proof they want? Akbaruddin Owaisi himself has said this. Charminar, Taj Mahal, Jama Masjid built by our ancestors. And this nation was ours and will continue to remain ours. So not with the ethos of Bharat, but what they have. Rule of Islam. Imagine what will happen when we unite. Waris Pathan, AIMIM 2020. Our 15 crore will dominate the 100 crore. 30% over 70%, this conversation, this talk. Muslims will finish 100 crore Hindus if cops removed. 15 minute. That 15 minute jibe, that happened. So, is this supremacist attitude there or not prevalent among the polity, leadership, etc.? Now, let's go back. So, it's not just in 2020, 2022, the recent times. Nearly 100 years ago. Do please remember that all through history, you Hindus have always been defeated by Muslim forces. So let us not create false equivalences here. Joining hands with the Muslims is the only way out for Hindus if they want freedom. This is Shaukat Ali of the Khilafat movement in February 1925. This is as quoted in Dr. Vikram Sampat's book, Savarkar, A Contested Legacy. Muslims have been converting Hindus for such a long time. It is not a new thing that has come up now. It is your Shuddhi that is a new phenomenon that sows seeds of discord amidst tranquil society. So as long as Muslims continue to convert Hindus, society is all right. The moment you talk about Shuddhi or coming back to Hinduism or coming back to your ancestors' beliefs, then you are disrupting society. Not a recent phenomenon. More than nearly 100 years ago, it has been said. Has it been said even before that? We'll get to that in just a bit. So, Bhagwat's message, can supremacy narrative actually work in a pluralistic Bharat, is the question that we ask. Let's go straight across to our panel. It's a very august panel and they have a lot of things to share. So we'll go straight across to them. Historian Hindol Sen Gupta is with us. Abhijit Jog, author of Asatyamev Jayate, also joins us this evening. Pandit Satish K. Sharma, chair of the British Board of Dharmic Scholars, with us. Divya Kumar Soti, National Security Affairs Analyst, a lawyer, with us. Sadhvi Jaya Bharti, scholar in Hindu Studies, with us. Namaste, Jai Hind, and thank you very, very much for joining us here on this conversation. And I hope each of you would draw, inferences and also add perspective. I want to start with Hindol Sen Gupta. Is this Muslims in Bharat are not supremacist? Mohan Bhagwat is the one who's pushing a boisterous rhetoric. Group of alleged celibates in Nagpur. Conversations, this is what Owaisi has said, while we've quoted what his own brother has espoused in the past. But can a supremacy narrative prevail in a pluralistic Bharat?
Look, Anand, this is a very old story that gets repeated again and again and again. To truly understand this, we must understand the history of why India was divided in the first place. India was divided because of this entire feeling that Muslims cannot live under any circumstances with Hindus unless they are the ruling community. This was the viewpoint of the Muslim League. This was the viewpoint of Iqbal. This was the viewpoint of, Sir Syed Ahmed. all of these people who advocated, who were the pioneers of advocating a separate homeland for Muslims, which became Pakistan, had exactly these views, that at the end of the day, their viewpoint was, we ruled India for so many years, we can never be a situation where we are a minority, and if we are ever a minority, then of course the Hindus would dominate, and that is unacceptable. So therefore there is no question of people living together. A separate homeland must be carved out. This of course was the sole reason why finally we had to divide the country. Now of course India's 75 years of relatively peaceful coexistence proves this theory wrong, but this, we have to understand that this is not new. This has been going on in this country for a very long time, and people who still propagate these views are only echoing the views of Jinnah and Iqbal and Sir Sayyid and all these people who exactly injected this poison many years ago, which led to the breakup of the country.
Abhijit Jog, you have written Asatyamev Jayate, how our history has been distorted, narratives and truths have been shielded. It is very popular in Marathi, but now it's also in English. I must confess that I am halfway through the book. I haven't read it entirely yet, but I want to catch up on a lot of reading, and that's something in my to-do list in 2023. But we are not here to play supremacy game. This is our country because Allah has willed it to be Bharat, that we should be born in Bharat. I'm quoting Mr. Owaisi's tweet today in response to Mohan Bhagwat. So do they harbor these instances of rule of Islam again? Is it true or not? Because we saw the likes of Sajid Rashidi. Are these exceptions to the moderate Muslims of our country? Or is this perhaps the overwhelming, permeating thing, the othering part, that we are different, we are better, we are superior?
Whether Muslims are harboring this ambition or not, to understand that we have to go back into history. In the year 1632, Muhammad Paighambar passed away, and after that, in 1634 CE, Arabs under the leadership of Khalifa Abu Bakr started campaigns for the spread of Islam. I'm going to give you a little longish answer. And in just 125 years, they won a vast area of land, right from Afghanistan in the east to Spain in the west. This entire area they subjugated in just 125 years. And more importantly, in 250 years flat, they converted all the people who stayed in this area to Islam, and they forced them to accept Arabic as their language. Against this, in India, even after 1100 years, they couldn't win the entire country. There were always pockets of resistance, like Shivaji Maharaj, Maharana Pratap, Holmes, and many others. And they could not even convert our entire population to Islam, neither could they force Arabic and later Persian on the entire population. So India stands out as a sore thumb in the history of Islamic conquest, which actually very few people understand. And that is why there is no dearth of scholars and poets who have actually written sorrowful prose and poetry on in the remembrance of this fact. So let's take the example of Allama Iqbal, who writes a poem called Shikwa. And he starts by complaining to the Lord that we followed all your teachings, we walked the path that you charted out for us, but still idolaters exist, and they not only exist but they prosper. And then he goes on to write a lot of complaints in a very emotional manner, and finally he says, and I will quote, "Bring you, O Lord, within our grasp, that most rare love for which we pray. To India's temple squatters, teach the truth of the Islamic way." So it's very clear that they harbor the ambition that India will finally become a fully Islamic country. I'll give you one more example. Maulana Shabbir Ahmad Usmani, who was the founder of Jamaat Ulema-e-Hind,
Right.
he had said, just as Medina had proved a base for the eventual victory of Islam in Arabia, Pakistan would pave the way for the triumphal return of Islam as the ruling power over the entire subcontinent. So I think Mohan Bhagwat is right in assuming that there is a section of Muslims in India who harbor this ambition that one day the entire subcontinent will convert to Islam and will be Islamic. So I think there is very much a basis for what he said.
So there is a basis for what he says, but does that, can we broad brush the entire Muslim community in our country, Divya Kumar Soti, on that? Because Mohan Bhagwat also says that the communists have to drop their supremacist attitude. Even Hindus in the country have to drop the supremacy attitude and this boisterous supremacy narrative. Everybody has to look at each other as an equal with respect. Where do you stand, Divya Kumar Soti?
Yes, he is right. But first, tackling this Muslim question. See, other panelists have cited so many instances from the history, but I would like to cite 2 episodes from last year itself. One, Maulana Taqir Raza, head of the Barelvi sect, which is followed by millions of Muslims in India as well in Pakistan and whole of the Indian subcontinent. Last year, in a public rally attended by thousands of people, he called upon the Prime Minister of the country to convert to Islam, and he was cheered by thousands of these people. Can you imagine anything like that happening in any other country where head of the state is being called upon to convert to Islam? Second instance, last year Muslim organizations, social groups went to Madras High Court asking for a ban on Hindu temple processions to pass from the vicinity of mosques. The problem that created Pakistan lies in the theological beliefs. There may be a debate about that, but this Muslim separatism and supremacy emanates from the theological beliefs which are enrooted in the Islamic theology. So first of all, we need to understand this thing. This is very controversial, but our national slogan is Satyamev Jayate, but we always try to shy away from the truth which can cause any kind of social problem. So that is the biggest problem. Now coming to the issue of communists. The communists have been so supremacist in their attitude that they wanted communism to prevail at the cost of India's national integrity. When Jinnah came up with this Pakistan resolution, Communist Party divided its cadre. Communist Party of India divided its cadre into 2, and they strategized that half of our cadre shall go with Muslim League and support this Pakistan creation of Pakistan, and the other half shall remain in India. They are so supremacist and allied with their international community, this communist community, that they found it highly problematic to even condemn the Chinese invasion of India in 1962. The party got divided on that point. Their ideologues wanted India to be, they never acknowledged India as a nation. They wanted it to be, divided into 17 parts so that they can, as they were not able to find acceptance throughout the country. So they wanted to, at least get it divided and find acceptance in in those parts.
Right.
So this kind of attitude, how can it be conducive to national unity?
So you're saying what you're saying is that there are certain few voices. Yeah, please complete, Divya Kumar Soti. Please complete.
Yes. One thing I want to add is that when Mr. Bhagwat says that Hindus shall also shun any kind of supremacist attitude, he's correct, and that also finds support from the Hindu theology. If you study Bhagavad Gita,
yes,
it says that a person who believes in Brahma, Brahmavadi is the word, for him, a Brahmin, a lady, even it talks about a cow or any other beast. He sees God in that.
Yeah,
every creature.
Yeah.
So, but Bhagwat is saying that kind of supremacist attitude is not supported by Hindu theology.
No, it is not, because in the Bhagavad Gita it very clearly says, though all are emanate from me, all the devatas emanate from me and they get their powers from me. I situate the astha of each bhakt in the particular devata they want to rest, because eventually it's a way for you to come to me. That is what the Gita says, that you may have, these may be the indirect ways, but if you are going to situate your astha in one particular devata or one particular form of worship, I will continue to situate your astha and firm it up there, because somewhere you are coming towards bhakti and you are coming towards connecting with the universe spiritually and perhaps the supreme. So that perhaps is a message in the Bhagavad Gita. I may not be able to quote the exact Sanskrit text, but I hope I have quoted the English translation or the interpretation correctly. Pandit Satish Sharma ji, I am coming to you. And Sadhvi ji, after that I'll come to you, ma'am. Yes, Pandit ji.
Pranam ji, namaskar, Jai Shri Ram to you. Thank you for the chance to speak briefly on this subject. I've got 2 or 3 points which I'd just like to make. Firstly, one of the few statements in Mohan Bhagwat ji's statement which I do agree with wholeheartedly is that Hindustan must remain Hindustan. That is indisputable, and I don't think anybody and any right-thinking person in any nation would dispute the right for Hindus to determine as a majority democratically the nature of the ancestral homeland of the Hindus. So that is completely a robust statement and has my agreement. But I must admit I'm disappointed by this statement that Muslims have nothing to fear. Firstly, it seems to be condescending. You know, it seems to be deliberately, provocatively condescending, and I don't know whether that contributes to the conversation. I think universally everybody has agreed that the Muslim community does not have fear of Hindus. I don't think that subject should be ever raised again. Otherwise, we cannot move to the contemplation of the notion of the bullying, thuggish, aggressive behavior, which is problematic in amongst many extremist elements of that community. So I think we should put to one side completely this notion that they have nothing to fear. I think we have proven that already. The people of Bharat have separated themselves from their ancestral civilizational birthplace, the Indus Valley, in an attempt to prove that there was nothing that this community had to fear. I think enough has been sacrificed. Moving on to this, the remarks by the opposition, Brinda Karat made an interesting statement, and that was that every citizen has equal rights irrespective of religion. Well, that's clearly false. It doesn't apply in Bharat. That statement in itself is a deceit. It's a lie. It's deliberately intended to mislead. And I'm shocked that a member of the Rajya Sabha could actually make such a statement which is so obviously incorrect and should be challenged. Turning to this notion about the fearful community, the remarks that have been made by so many of these extremist Muslim Islamist leaders establish that there is nothing to fear for them. The remarks that they've made are frankly ethnocidal and potentially incite genocide. You know, the erasure of a community selected by its religious identity is an immensely serious statement to make. In any other nation, if somebody were to make those statements, they would be arrested and brought in front of human rights courts as persons inciting hatred and genocide. Ethnocide, if not genocide. And so there is absolutely no grounds to fear. But one last thing I would say, I don't actually have any problem with people with supremacist attitudes so long as they are within the law and within human rights legislation and standards. Whatever thoughts we have rattling around in our heads, really, that's a matter for a person to work with and improve themselves, become more civil, become more human through the course of their life. But the moment it transgresses into the human rights of somebody else, it impinges and denies the freedoms that other people enjoy, then it should not be tolerated. It is contrary to every aspect of human rights. And so I do think we need to move this conversation forward. The biggest challenge that I think most communities are now facing is democracies are trying to understand how to engage with non-democratic ideologies who are happy to assume aggressive violence. This is not just in Bharat. We've seen it on the streets of France very recently.
Indeed.
We've seen it on the streets of Leicester.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to have to confront this issue. How does a democracy handle people who refuse to accept that democracy requires the loser to give consent to the victor? If there are people who are continuously losing in a democratic system, and then they refuse to give consent to the victors to actually implement their plans and the projects and the ideologies that the mandate of the community gives them the right to do. How do we deal with that? And I think the sooner we address this, the better it will be for everybody. A person of Mohan Bhagwat's stature and of his influence, I think it's probably about time that we stopped monkey balancing, that there is an elephant in the room. The longer you leave an elephant in the room, it develops into a herd of elephants, and then all of a sudden there is no room for anything else. And so I think really we would hope that this conversation would improve and become a little bit more frank, direct, honest, established on satya, rather than playing with words which are potentially open to misinterpretation.
But this is perhaps more direct than what has been in the past, and slowly it's being direct. But you're right that the conversations have to be frank, they have to be direct, and the vanquished cannot continue to control the victor and try and continue to influence the mandate like you say. But if there are 1,000 people cheering the conversation or the utterances of one, so is one the villain, or are 1,001 equally harboring the same thought process, Sadhvi Jaya Bharti?
See, Anand, I couldn't agree more with, Pandit Sharma. I'd like to bring a few points, I certainly do not agree with some part of the statement of Mr. Bhagwat. And that is, when they, we've been witnessing and, we've been talking about this Hindu supremacy and that even Hindus should shun the supremacy. It's not back, there has been people, and when you're talking about the communist supremacy, I think it is more than required now that we don't have to dig the history way too back to figure out that the left supremacy has always taken pride in shunning Hindus. It was just the Tukre Tukre movement that came up from JNU, and whom were they calling? Bharat Tere Tere Tukre Honge, Inshallah, Inshallah. Who's being supremacist here? Who's, their identity. It's not because, people were saying a moment ago here that they want that, the entire Indian subcontinent will one day convert to Islam. It is even before. They say the moment we are 51% of the population, we will rule India only through the means of electorate. We will win the elections. We will make our Muslim leaders sit in the position of powers. And then you would see, and if a person in minority can say कि 15 minutes के लिए पुलिस हटा दो, and then we will see, remove the police, and then you see what we do for Hindus. Who's being a supremacist here, and who are you subjugating? The entire identity of left. I'm sorry to say, I wanted to make this conversation even broader. Worldwide, there are two faiths who believe in not letting the other faiths live in their own identity and in their own practice. One is Christianity, that is second, and first is Islam. Christianity does it through, paying through greed and, giving favors and using the poor people and, manipulating them. And Islam has done it for ages on the edge of the sword. When people, the way we call Indian Muslims, the other day I was discussing the same on your panel. Muslim invaders, they never came to India with their babies, with their children, or with their families. And how did they leave a race here? By converting people, by marrying Hindu women, by capturing Hindu women, keeping in their harems. So if people when my country was divided, giving Muslims a separate piece of land, I absolutely blame those leaders who kept 5% of Muslims in India.
I've lost your audio, Jaya Bharti ji. I've lost your audio.
Hello?
Now I've got you back. I've got you back now.
Yeah. So this is an absolutely uncalled for situation, and yes, Mohan Bhagwat ji might have been very politically soft in saying that, oh, please identify, you're not absolutely coming from Arabic countries, you're not that Arab Muslim, you've been forcefully converted, and it's time you realize it and come back. And he's been, yes, Mr. Pandit Sharma has been right that it's no more, we don't do the monkey balancing, and if they want to come back. But I'll tell you, they have been brainwashed forever. They know that their deen tells them to kill whoever does not follow Islam. So,
no, but see, but when you say they,
civil court and the check
I'm
on
somewhere
population.
because I know a lot of people who believe that not just Islam, its interpretation has also got to evolve. It evolved. There are nations which have been far more moderate in their approach. Yeah, and there you may believe that. No, see, one aspect is, and somewhere I want to get into this argument where samabhava, sarva dharma samabhava may not be possible because the dynamics of every theology, every religion is different. But some adara is possible. That is, respect for everyone is possible. Now, is that
tolerance? They give the whole responsibility of tolerance on Hindus. How much they tolerate the Nupur Sharma case is right in front of. They were calling to her to be hanged on the Chauraha.
That's where this aspect of samadara has to happen, or equanimity has to happen, where if you will not tolerate insult somewhere, then the other side should also not be insulted, and both ways. Now you cannot say अगर उसके बारे में बोलेंगे तो मुझे काट देंगे, इनके बारे में बोलेंगे तो चलेगा. So this aspect.
यही है.
No, this aspect also has to be challenged in our society, is what I'm trying to say.
Exactly. For them, it is, they question even if I get to disrespect them. And even if I'm put on a gunpoint and killed, nobody questions.
No, but see, that's where the underlying thought is that one person who makes the call guilty, or are the 1001 guilty, because there are 1,000 who also cheer. So there are 1,000 who do not stand up and say, you don't make that utterance, you don't go and try and make this Sartan Se Juda call, but they quietly witness and say, oh good, glad somebody is shouting. Now that is a dangerous trend. That is a dangerous trend.
That's the point.
Communities have to self-regulate too, and within the larger sense, there are those who will, rabble rousers among the Hindu Samaj are called out by those within the Hindu Samaj outrightly, and then they're distanced and then they're shunned. But does that happen across the board in other communities also in Bharat? That is something which everybody needs to introspect. Hindol Sen Gupta mentioned a lot of people in the past, and I'm coming back to you. Goes back to the entire Shah Waliullah Delhi. So when the Wahhabi movement comes in, so you had Wahhab and Delhi, both students at the same seminary. One goes westward, one comes to Bharat and East, and then you had Sayyid Ahmad Shah Delhi, that's his son, Shahid Delhi, Inayat Ali, Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan, and of course the entire Aligarh movement, then Ahle Adi, Deoband, all of them have spoken about a separate identity stemming from this entire supremacy angle. So in history, there have been many influential voices, influential sects which lacks of followers, who have talked about or inherently felt themselves to be superior than the other, not just within their sect, within their community, but also over and above other religions and other faiths. Rahmatullah Sayani, who became the Indian National Congress president in 1896, in his presidential speech in Kolkata, spoke of Muslims being rulers of the nation before the British came. And this has just been sent to me by Dr. Vikram Sambat. He's watching the broadcast. He couldn't be a part of it. And he says, this is part of my book, Volume 1, Savarkar Echoes from a Forgotten Past. So these are all quotes and these are all people. So historians have also noted this, Hindol Sen Gupta. So is this a continuum that we are looking at? And does this continuum have to be arrested now? Otherwise, we are going to see yet another round of a repeat of history again. Every 100 years, is India going to get sliced and diced and torn apart?
This is certainly something that has historical precedence. There is a long history of this kind of thought. You mentioned one historical evidence. Look at the 2 letters that Iqbal wrote to Jinnah, right, in the late 1930s. In those letters, Iqbal, who actually many people in this country still think of as a great poet and so on and so forth, and in many ways he was a rather interesting poet. But if you look at his political views, what does Iqbal say to Jinnah in those letters? What is he detailing? Iqbal is detailing point by point why the Hindus and the Muslims cannot live together. And his primary reason is that at the end of the day, the Muslims are a separate nation, and a nation that in a sense was always destined to rule upon this land. And therefore, in any situation where that is taken away, coexistence would be impossible. That's why, this entire idea that why only separate electorates have an entirely separate country. And in fact, people forget that Iqbal not only mentioned a separate nation, he actually drew the contours of that nation. He actually painted in those letters exactly which provinces of undivided India would become Pakistan. And indeed, that's exactly what happened, right? Now, the one person who understood this the most, and sadly we don't talk enough about this, is of course Baba Saheb Ambedkar. If you read his book, Pakistan or the Partition of India, Ambedkar is lucid about these things. Ambedkar says very clearly that, look, and here's the interesting thing, you mentioned Vikram Sampath, a dear friend of mine. Ambedkar says that what is Savarkar trying to do? Savarkar is saying, well, actually there are no two nations, there is only one nation, we all have to live together. But at the end of the day, laws and regulations and everything has to be the same. And Ambedkar says that, but the Muslims would never accept this. So this is a recipe of disaster. And he says that Savarkar, in a sense, is never going to be able to convince them of this, because the leaders of the Muslim community would always argue that if that were true, then their numbers would be in minority, and therefore there would always be Hindu hegemony. So therefore it's always going to be a recipe for civil war. So all of this has long documented history. I reiterate, of course, India's 75 years of coexistence disproves many of these theories. However, people who say these things even today are triggering, in a sense, a bad history. And I don't think that's the right thing to do at this juncture, or indeed any juncture.
Well, interesting development this. There are historians and there are people who are watchers who have also said that somewhere, the Bharat society, Bharat community is also to blame, because the doors of our temples and our forts always open towards the inside. वो अंदर से ही खुलते थे और अंदर की तरफ ही खुलते थे. So there are those who would also weaken us from within and make these statements. Now there are another utterances, because you said Jai Shri Ram, Pandit Satish Sharma ji. I'm going to quickly come to you and get a quick reaction on this. The Bihar Education Minister, Mr. Chandrasekhar, has just now, this is a development we flashed at the bottom of our screen. He's described the Ramcharitmanas as a book of hatred, a book that divides. So, and he was addressing a convocation ceremony of the Nalanda Open University, where he described Ramcharitmanas as a book that divides the society. So if we have on the one hand those who believe that I am superior to you and yours is an inferior practice itself, and then there are those who will pick up texts and then go ahead and deride it while abusing Hindu and Hindutva.
Jay, it's a principle of mine to only speak about subjects in which I have received guidance and acquired a bit of wisdom. And that's how a wise person is identified. Clearly, this gentleman has established by his utterance his complete ignorance, his lack of knowledge, and his total lack of wisdom on this subject. And that's probably adequate as a response to it. But I wanted to cut through all of this religiosity and this theological and historical rhetoric, which often can cloud the situation, and come to one very simple reality. And that simple reality is that when the British ruled Hindus, Hindus were enslaved. When the Muslims ruled Hindus in India, Hindus were enslaved. It wasn't as though we were given the beneficence of their magnificent civilizational achievements. And so when each and every one of these pseudo-religious leaders makes the utterance that they want to dominate, etc., they are speaking from the point of view of wanting and desirous of enslaving the indigenous people of Bharat. And that should be the only thought that we have in our mind. There is no there's no need to get confused with the religious texts and the scripture and everything else. History is stark, history is clear. There are people who believe that Hindus should either be enslaved or erased.
Right.
And that's it in a nutshell.
No, I thank you all. I think there's been a lot of plain speak, no monkey balancing and addressing and taking the bull by the horns and recognizing what we as Bharat need to realize and understand if we need to prevail or perhaps preserve the ethos and the DNA of Bharat. So, Hindustan must remain Hindustan. That ethos somewhere rings true. There are those who would believe no, but this country was partitioned on the grounds of Hindustan and Pakistan. It was broken. Bharat was broken into 65% and 35% on these grounds. And that's something which we should not forget. And that happened just about 75 years ago. I thank you all. Thank you all for joining us on this conversation. Very enlightening conversation. Thank you very, very much. We're going to take a very short break. When we come back, ladies and gentlemen, it is RSS leader and author Ram Madhav who takes the right stand. Stay with us.